welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. And as we continue our look at module number 3, what we're looking at in this video, as you can tell from the title slide, is Managing Multiculturalism and Diversity. Now, this is a fascinating topic, and quite frankly, this is a topic that continues to evolve and grow, both in significance, in importance for us as contemporary managers, as well as its impact not only upon business, but all of society. And so this becomes a crucial topic of which, admittedly, we will have some things to say, but we certainly do not have a comprehensive set of recommendations for you. This is too fast-moving and dynamic a situation for us to have established best practices and protocol. Nevertheless, it's an important topic to dive into. Let's see if we can talk about some things right here. First of all, we hope that after this video, you will be able to define diversity and multiculturalism, what's similar and what's different in these two terms and how they both have implications in the workplace, as well as identify reasons for increased diversity at work, and examine some of the challenges that we as managers face today, working with greater diversity and multiculturalism in our workplaces. Finally, we will suggest at least some first steps in promoting diversity at work, and at least give you some food for thought as you enter into your own set of individual challenges, significance, and wonderful things about multiculturalism and diversity that you will encounter as leaders and managers in your career. Now, first of all, we do want to state that there is a difference between multiculturalism and diversity, at least to the way the terms are used here in this class and in this textbook. So as you see here on the slide, we will define multiculturalism as the broad issues that are associated with differences in values, beliefs, behaviors, customs, and attitudes held by people in different cultures. Now, what do we mean by this? We mean that certainly we will have people that we will engage who come from different cultures. They will be both the employees that we manage, our peers and colleagues we work with, our customers, our vendors. With increasing globalism comes greater opportunity and occasion for us to encounter in business people from different cultures, and that will imply differences. We will have differences along all sorts of different dimensions, including our values, our beliefs, our behaviors, presuppositions about how the world is supposed to work, presuppositions and presumptions about how business is supposed to work, working customs, attitudes, all of those kinds of things. And as a result, there will be issues, both broad and narrow. And the issues themselves that are associated with these differences is what we refer to as multiculturalism. We take it for granted that when we encounter and work and deal with people from different cultures, there's going to be differences. The question is, for us as managers, what are the issues we encounter as a result of those differences? That's really the heart of what we talk about here and define as multiculturalism. Now, hold that in one hand and consider the term on the right-hand side of the slide. What is diversity for the sake of this discussion in this textbook and this video? We define diversity as what exists in a group or organization when its members differ. When its members differ from one another along one or more important decisions such as age, gender, ethnicity, and of course there are other socioeconomic background, education level. There's just a whole set of reasons why members in an organization differ from one another, and that brings about diversity. And of course, multiculturalism and diversity have direct implications on the very important aspect of corporate culture. The question is, does your culture celebrate, leverage, and use diversity as an asset? Or does your corporate culture do something else with diversity? We'll talk about that as well in this lecture. Now, why do we talk about diversity and multiculturalism in this particular series of lectures? Because as managers, you will face ever increasing levels of diversity and multiculturalism in your work, in your workplace, in your organizations, with your customer base, wherever you turn in your career. And there are some of the reasons why you can see here illustrated on this slide. First reason is simply that demographics continue to change and evolve in the labor force. Therefore, whether you like it or not, you will be managing and leading a more diverse workforce. That's just simply the way the demographics have been moving for quite some time. The second reason, you can see there is an increased awareness that diversity at least has the potential to improve the quality of the workforce on all sorts of different dimensions. Diversity has been identified as the source of all sorts of at least potential advantages that improve both performance and the quality of the performance. You see there on the bottom there are the two reasons there. One, legislation and legal action have mandated that diversity and multiculturalism be embraced in the workplace and has protected all sorts of groups who might otherwise have fallen between the gaps and been treated as less than equal in very real and practical ways in the workplace in the past. Legislation and legal action has protected those groups and individuals, and therefore we are able to see more and more diversity and multiculturalism on the surface, right up front in the organization. Not to mention, as you can see there, the fourth box, the fact that we are simply, as a business environment, we are more global. And all you have to look at is just the sourcing of where products that we use come from, where they are manufactured, where they are built, to realize that all of our consumer business is completely globalized now. We rely upon global supply chains, we rely upon global labor, we have global sources for resources. Well, all four of these trends lead to increasing diversity and multiculturalism in business. And you can see here, the most fundamental trend is that all organizations are becoming more diverse and multicultural. With that comes greater awareness and greater responsibility for us as managers to work and to lead and to manage in ethical and enlightened ways. So, there are other dimensions that we see increasing, other than just the common ones we may have listed in the previous slides. You can see here that the average age in the workforce is increasing. People are living longer, people are living healthy lives longer, and people are working longer. There are an increasing number of females in the workforce. And this has brought about all sorts of issues to the forefront, including what we know here, as you see here illustrated, the glass ceiling, which is a offhand term used to describe the perceived barrier that keeps women from advancing to top management. This is a very, very real thing that women encounter in the workplace. And it's something that we have to continue to be aware of, to fight against, and to seek to champion real equity and equality in the workplace despite our gender differences. Of course, ethnicity, the ethnic composition of a group or organization, continues to increase in diversity. And this is a wonderful thing, or at least it is a potentially wonderful thing. We'll talk about that at the end. It is something that needs to be addressed deliberately, proactively, and championed in order to get the most out of the potential performance enhancements that you can see from a broadly diverse ethnic composition in your workforce. You can see here ethnic distribution trends in the United States, running from the beige-ish looking bars in 2012, and the purplish is projected into 2060. So you can see here that the differences from white alone, black alone, American Indian and Alaska Native alone, Asian alone, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, two or more races, non-Hispanic, white alone, non-Hispanic of any race. And you see there the indication, at least statistically from census data, the greatest increase in groups in our growing U.S. workforce is going to be in the Hispanic population in terms of our manpower and where we will have the potential for employee groups and pools and who we are managing. Some other trends in diversity and multiculturalism that we face these days: increasing diversity along dimensions of physical mobility, religion, single parents in the workforce, dual career marriages, alternative lifestyles, vegetarianism and veganism, political ideologies. All of these dimensions we are seeing more and more with implications in the workplace. Along the terms of multicultural differences, we notice that more and more organizations are actively enhancing their multiculturalism and championing it, seeking it, intentionally building their workforces to tilt towards multiculturalism makeup. And soon, we hope, all companies may become multicultural due to changes in the external labor market and the fact that U.S. immigration is at its highest rate since 1910. All of these kinds of things suggest that as a manager, it is simply inept to keep your head in the sand and somehow believe that nowadays diversity, multiculturalism won't matter, that the only thing that matters necessarily is employee performance. That is really a parochial way of looking at managing employees and does not gain a sense of sensitivity to the way that our culture is moving and the way that our cultural values, convictions, and the things that as a culture we're seeking to celebrate and advance, how that affects our people in the organizations in which we work, we serve, we lead, and we manage. And so we would suggest that some of the challenges we face these days in managing diverse multicultural workforces is in the practical and actual exercise of equity and fairness. It is certainly popular for us to be able to say, yes, I champion these things, I believe in these things, but in the practical working out and policy, that's one of the areas of challenge for us as managers. To remain completely and absolutely non-discriminatory, not only in our hiring practices, but also in our ongoing management practices. To demonstrate fairness across the board, including fairness in the distribution of opportunities, as well as in equity and distribution of rewards. Acknowledging and facing up to our implicit bias. And this is the thing, that all human beings have built-in presuppositions and therefore implicit bias in one or many areas. Actually acknowledging, seeing that, and recognizing that, well, that's a huge thing because, as the next bullet point points out, every single one of us has blind spots. We have presuppositions about not only individuals, but about whole people groups. All of us have that, and in order to recognize and make an advance along this line, we have to recognize, or at least begin to recognize, where our blind spots are. And we have to do all of this while still working hard to accomplish organizational goals. It's not simply that we're trying to grow as human beings, but when we're entrusted with a role in an organization of management or leadership, more importantly, we are charged with making sure that our people still accomplish organizational goals. So how does this work? Well, what are some first steps? Some first steps I would tell you is that for yourself first and for everyone around you, begin to actually work in small, informal, and formal ways to educate yourself and your organization to the potential benefits of diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism. That truly it can be, potentially, a source of extraordinary performance. Now, the reason I keep saying potentially is because it does not really square up with saying, well, if I just make my workforce diverse, automatically it's going to lead to higher performance. That's not really how things work. We'll talk about that in the next slide. But the first step is to educate yourself, as well as your immediate group, your work group, to the benefits of diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism. The second point then is to actually and practically create a workplace where different viewpoints are valued and embraced. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've worked in workplaces where that is not the case, where groupthink and agreeing with the boss was the way things got done. And so you as a manager have to work really hard in practical ways to make sure that you are soliciting different viewpoints, you are not poo-pooing them, you are not shooting them down unduly, you actually are, by example, demonstrating the value in considering different viewpoints, seriously considering them, whether or not you go with them or not, but that the idea that people with different viewpoints are welcomed, their opinions are valued, and you are willing to seriously consider their perspectives, that goes a long way for people to understand that by your example, you are creating a workplace where these things are celebrated. Now, what do you do if your boss is not signed up for this? Well, I don't think there are necessarily any easy answers to that. I'll be quite honest with you. You are not your boss. You cannot necessarily change or control your boss, but you still, in the domain of your influence, can work to demonstrate that at least one leader, one manager in the organization values and embraces different perspectives and viewpoints. Now, then the third point there, you can see there, to promote open communication along these lines. And let me see if I can give you an actual example of this, because it's easy to put that on a slide. It's painfully difficult to actually work out in real life. So let me show you this photograph. What is this photograph? This is a photograph of the team that I was in. As you can see there, I'm on the left. This team of 6 people in my master's degree cohort. When I earned my master's degree, we were in a cohort program, spent the whole year working together. And the 6 of us were selected to compete in an international strategy competition that was hosted by several graduate schools. And so we competed against schools, teams from schools from a graduate school in Canada, several on the East Coast, and San Jose State was another one. And when we were put on this team together, you can see that this is a somewhat diverse team. Well, in fact, let me tell you exactly who's on this team. You see myself there on the far left. I am a native Californian. I've lived in the Bay Area my whole life, and I am obviously ethnically Chinese, but I'm Asian American. Next to me is Lara. Lara is a German student who is here on a Fulbright scholarship. Not only brilliant, but also one of the genuinely sweetest people I have met in my entire life. Okay, we all loved Lara. Standing behind the other gentleman there is Lara's boyfriend, Simon, also here from Germany on a Fulbright scholarship. And he was also very smart. He thought he was twice as good as he actually was. You know what I'm talking about? You ever meet someone like that who genuinely is a smart fella, but really thinks the world of himself? Okay. And then in the middle there, the short gal is Prasanti. She is an Indian national and a software engineer by trade, sort of a prototypical software engineer, one of those people who likes code better than people, is very socially awkward around people. A smart gal though, but just really sort of, an introvert and a little bit socially awkward. Next to her, Prasanti, also an Indian national, couldn't be more different than Prasanti. I tell you, she was, Rishika was working on her second master's degree, already had a master's degree from a university in India, and had worked as a consultant for Accenture. After she graduated with her second MBA, she went to work for Facebook and then got tired of that and decided to get another job, and so she is now working at Google. Okay, so really smart gal. And next to her is Cherry, a Chinese national, a software salesperson. Now, I tell you that a little bit about each of their backgrounds and who they are as people, because we were put together on this team to compete in a strategy competition that ran for the better part of a semester. And the first couple of weeks of us working together, we could not get along. I kid you not, all we did was argue. We argued about everything. Every single decision that this little company was supposed to make, this company, Inkit, is the company name we decided upon. Every single decision we made, we argued and fought about it. We couldn't get anything done. This went on for the first week. This went on for the second week. We were like, after we finished our classes, we would get together in the afternoons and evenings to try and work on this thing together. And we just got to the point where by the end of the second week, we just hated each other because all we were doing was arguing. After the second week, I finally, the next meeting we had, I sat down with all 6 of us. I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I cannot for the life of me figure out why we can't agree upon anything, but I don't want to do this with you anymore because we already see each other 7 days a week for school. I don't want to hate you guys for the rest of my life, and that's where we're going. So I would rather either get off this team and not do this thing, no matter how prestigious it is. I'd rather not be a part of this team than hate you guys for the rest of my life. So either we figure this out or I'm outie, okay? And so we started talking. Why is it that we couldn't agree on anything? What the heck is going on here? Seems like everybody's so stubborn about what they believe and all these kinds of things. Why can't we get along, right? Heck, isn't diversity supposed to bring higher performance? Why can't we even get out of the gates here, right? So here's the thing. I started asking questions. I said, Laura and Simon, why is it that every time we talk about our little company for the sake of this competition, why every time we talk about borrowing money to finance, take on a bond or a note or something like that, you guys are so dead set against it? And they looked at each other and said, well, that's easy. It's because we're German. And Germans are taught to be financially austere. We don't believe in debt. In fact, if a German citizen carries a balance on a credit card from one month to the next, something is morally wrong with them. They weren't brought up correctly. We don't do that. It's like, well, that sort of makes sense because, of course, for us Americans, right, we have a tax bill due on April 15th. We put it on a credit card. We have no problem with debt, right? So that explains that, right? Okay, so these multicultural differences are playing into how we work together. I get it. So here's another question. We asked Cherry. Cherry, why is it that every time we have a decision to make, you're so stubborn? It has to be your way or the highway. You're unwilling to budge, unwilling to bend on anything because it's getting in the way of us moving ahead as a team, as a work team here. Is it because you're a Chinese national? And she said, no, it's not exactly. And then she told us a story why. She said, I was born under China's one-child policy that they, of course, have since rescinded, but she was born during that time. And so the problem there, or the challenge, is that her father always wanted a son. And therefore, nothing she ever did in her life or career was good enough to please her father. She was the first woman in her software company to be promoted to management. Wasn't good enough for her dad. She was the highest paid manager at her company. Wasn't good enough for her father. And she just listed off event after event, accomplishment after accomplishment that was never good enough for her father. And now her father has passed, and so she sees herself as always trying to earn the approval of a father who will never be able to give it to her because he's gone now. And that's why, one of the results is why she's so stubborn. What does this mean to you? What this means is that after we had a chance to sit down and talk about who we actually were as people and why we saw things differently, why we had certain perspectives and worldviews, in some cases because of diversity in where we came from, and in some cases not. Sometimes, like in Cherry's case, it's not because she's Chinese, it's because of her family growing up and the imprint that made on her as a human being. And we all have that, right? No matter where we were born, no matter how we grew up, our family life when we were children and how our parents treat us, that has a huge impact on us. Now, this story has a good ending because as we got going with the strategy competition again, we found it was easier for us to work together because we had a little bit better understanding where we were all coming from. And we had demonstrated we were willing to hear the other person out without judgment. Well, that led to some great things. As you can see here on the slide, we ended up winning the competition. That's right, we won first place in the competition. Not only did we win first prize in the competition, we got an additional award for the deliverables that we presented, to the point where the judges actually asked our professor after we won, hey, tell us the truth. Did your team find a way to cheat the system? Because we have never seen performance like this in 40 years of doing this competition. Yeah, we really did a good job. We demonstrated that a diverse work group, given the right set of circumstances and open communication, being willing to get to know each other as people, can lead to extraordinary performance. We demonstrated that. We proved that. That's why I tell you, what it takes first is the willingness to talk and to listen to one another as people. Now, as we mentioned, we hope that after this video and after you've heard these kinds of things, that you'll be able to define what is diversity, what is multiculturalism in the workplace. You will be able to identify some reasons why increased diversity at work is a wonderful thing. To examine some of the challenges that we face today working with greater diversity and multiculturalism, and suggest some first steps in promoting diversity at work. Now, I dearly hope that this has been useful to you. I do, of course, encourage you to also digest the content in the textbook as well as this lecture and the slide deck. And we'll see you in the next lecture.